When De Pfeffel Johnson suggested that to cancel Christmas by putting the country into lockdown would be inhumane, I decided to back off from YouTube, have a bit of a Yuletide truce, and settle in for our first Christmas at our eldest new house with her and her partner. So when Daft De Pfeffel did, in fact, do the inhuman thing, any last respect that I might have had for the man vanished in a puff of Scrooge-like humbuggery. Livid as I was, I phoned a good friend of mine who lives in Belgium for some moral support, which he duly provided, and I felt energised enough to break my truce and post another video in my amped up state. But then I spoke to another friend who took the opposing view, and then another who was also of the safety first opinion. And whilst this was going on, I was also in an email exchange, or rather a text exchange, with yet another good friend, one who suffers from chronic and debilitating asthma, it must be said, who was lecturing me, in the scientific way that he does, about the catastrophic consequences of an R number on infection rates that hits even the modest figure of 1.5. And I am nothing but a collection of influences of the general media, conventional wisdom, the seemingly far-out conspiracies that infect my Twitter and YouTube feeds, all have an effect, but mostly I'm influenced by the good faith opinions of my friends. Needless to say, my resolve to double down on the position of freedom above all things began to evaporate, and I never made that video. So more introspection followed, as it often does, and I began to ask myself, not for the first time, what if I'm wrong? What if my adherence to liberty as a value above all other considerations was misplaced? Was I doing damage? Was I adding fuel to the fire on the wrong side of the argument? Will my opinions, modestly disseminated amongst the 1,000 or so people who view my posts, embolden others to take off their masks or otherwise break the rules, indirectly but actually cause lives to be lost? Or even will my words and actions actually undermine the cause that I trumpet? Starkly put, am I hampering that which I most care about, a return to real freedom? So as Mrs. X and I did our best to enjoy, or rather endure, an almost solitary Christmas, soul-searching was the order of those empty days that should have been filled with family cheer. I've never been that much of a Christmas enthusiast, to be honest, tending towards the curmudgeonly. The endless adverts, Slade, Mariah Carey and the Pogues, and the sheer commercialisation of Christmas was usually enough to turn me off. But this year, despite, or more probably because of, the restrictions, I was feeling pretty contrary about it. I wasn't going to let Matt fucking Hancock tell me I wasn't going to be able to enjoy Christmas. But in the end, it wasn't up to me. The vulnerability of the family members of others were quite rightly put as a higher priority than my loathing of the health secretary. We spent Christmas alone, and for the first time in 5 years, I actually missed having a telly. One of my friend's reactions felt to me like he was patting me on the head, telling me not to worry, there's nothing to see here, and effectively to go back to sleep. As he is a friend, I'm sure that's not what he was doing, although it sure felt like it. And it didn't feel very nice, if I'm honest. But I have to remember that his opinion, like that of all of my friends, was delivered in good faith. And this is why I set such store in friends' opinions, rather than that of distant politicians or self-aggrandising television reporters. Because they don't want me to be wrong. They don't want me to be wrong just for the sake of them being right. If they think I'm wrong, since they are friends, they lay a path for me to get back to being right, in their opinion. Strangers, like politicians or reporters, don't do this. Strangers, at least to some degree, are playing to the crowd. They want to be right, and if that means making you wrong, then so be it. But to return to the other side of the existential issue of whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong, what if they're wrong? What will be the consequences of all my warnings going unheeded as they plough on with the lockdowns, the punitive fines, the unhuman practice of mask wearing, the silencing of differing opinions, in the name of public safety of course, the evisceration of the middle class by the destruction of their businesses, and the advantages unfairly handed to the biggest, richest and most powerful handful of companies on earth. Let's take the lockdowns, and to be charitable, let's take them in isolation. As we all remember, the initial lockdown was for 3 weeks to flatten the curve. Remember that? The idea was that the virus was going to go through the population, and the only thing that could usefully be done was to restrict physical interactions in order to slow down the infection rate sufficiently that the health service could cope, to buy time for the NHS to get on top of it. Early on, when not much was known about COVID, this seemed an eminently sensible approach, and one which was on the whole complied with. There was no talk of beating the virus or zero COVID, since those who know about such things knew that that was impossible. But no sooner was the guidance announced, the police force immediately began behaving like the Stasi by sending drones over the Peak District in Derbyshire to harass people walking alone with their dogs. If there is anything less likely to pass on the infection of a virus than walking alone on a moor, I'd like to know what it is. And that was the first moment when I began to feel that something sinister was happening. And as any virologist or epidemiologist knows, viruses don't have waves. They go through the population as they always have. There is an early steep peak followed by a long and shallow tail. They only have waves if you artificially stop the spread. Imposing a lockdown early to flatten the curve wasn't a bad tactic to buy time, but it leaves you with the problem of what you do when you come out of lockdown. The constant yo-yoing of easing the lockdown followed by an even harsher imposition is what is causing the waves and prolonging the agony. As it is, escaping the clutches of the European Union seems like child's play by comparison. There seems to be no end to this. Lockdowns by any quantifiable measure seem to make no difference, instead merely slowing the spread of the virus, which was the stated and feasible aim of the first. Countries that have had hard lockdowns, like Spain, seem to have fared no better than those, like Sweden, that have had only the lightest of restrictions. But what we do know about lockdowns is the economic devastation that they cause. It is estimated that the British government has spent at least 250 billion on this lockdown, with some even saying that it is double that. But whatever the amount, this supposedly end-of-the-world financial crisis of 2008 represents merely a blip compared to this. Perhaps as many as 75% of all hospitality businesses will never reopen. Their staff will never be re-employed, and their owners, mostly bankrupt, will be lumbered with valueless premises which will be picked up for a song by those few businesses that have done well out of the pandemic. Expect to see Amazon entering the property or real estate business. Expect Amazon to entering every business, in fact, since there will be no other businesses left. There will be no more middle class, since all of their wealth will have been transferred upwards to the likes of Jeff Bezos, who reportedly earned $13 billion in a single day. You know, maybe capitalism deserves to fail when you hear things like that. Capitalism was supposed to be the way in which a man could claw his way up with hard work and determination to carve out something for himself and his family, to make something out of nothing, to bring forth a product or a service that wasn't there before and improve not only his world, but everybody else's. That's what it was supposed to do, and that's what its champions proclaimed it did. But when one man can afford to give $2 to every single human being on earth and only lose a day's pay, then maybe capitalism deserves to fail. But lives, we are told, are more important than money. Indeed they are. As a standalone statement, who could argue with it? But whose lives? But as we saw with Black Lives Matter, just saying something kind doesn't make you kind. We know Black Lives Matter. We know this. As in, we don't need to be told. Of course Black Lives Matter. But with regard to the virus, whose lives are more important than money? Granny's, of course. And Granny's life does indeed matter. Her life is very definitely more important than money. Again, we don't need to be told this. You know why? Because we're human beings. And as human beings, we understand that to prioritise Granny's life over and above others' lives is not only irrational, it's actually quite callous. Because it's not kind to prioritise a COVID life over another life. But that's what we've been doing. We've been treating COVID as the only threat that people face. And we've been prioritising COVID over heart disease, over cancer, over dementia and Alzheimer's, over lung conditions and over respiratory illnesses and over pneumonia and even over influenza, which appears magically, due to the way its recording has been conflated with COVID, to have vanished completely as an ailment. Who knows how many lives have been lost since the National Health Service morphed seamlessly into the National COVID Service? Who knows? I don't. But there will be people keeping score, and there will be a reckoning. I'd like to think that the number of COVID lives saved will exceed the number lost from other conditions. I'd like to think that, but I don't know. Maybe Mengele, Matt Hancock and DeFeffel Johnson might need to start preparing their legal defences. And that's just the deaths resulting directly from the redirection of medical resources. What about all the other conditions brought about by the hardship and stress of bankruptcy, endless and unrepayable debt, unemployment, low incomes, family breakdowns, depression and, in extremis, suicides that will surely come? And the death toll from such things is likely to dwarf whatever we have had so far. A recent study, and the only one so far conducted on the effects of lockdowns, concluded that lockdowns will result in 10 times as many deaths as lives saved. The economic damage that has deliberately been done to this country stretches so far into the future, it may have an effect for many, many generations. But the damage to the nation's health will be no walk in the park. The damage has been done. All we can do is watch it unfold and maybe, if we're angry enough, bring to justice those who were responsible. As I say, the damage to the country's finances and its welfare have already been done. It's done. It's been done in full view, and there is little, if anything, that we can do to soften the blow. But there is one thing that we can do. There is something that can be salvaged from the wreckage. There is something supremely valuable that, no matter the damage that has been done to it, and so long as we make the decision to fix it, can always be fixed. That something is our free society. And it is our free society, more than our health, our jobs or our lives, that is at the greatest risk from the government's overblown and spasmodic response to this not particularly serious virus. And it is our free society that is more important even than the lives that make it up. Because it is, whether you realise it or not, what we live our lives to enjoy. People don't actually notice the liberty that they freely suckle on, but as someone who spends a disproportionate amount of his time attempting to keep water from going where it wants, freedom is a bit like plumbing. Nobody ever notices it until there's something wrong. Nobody notices a lack of water until they turn the tap, until they need it. And people don't think they need freedom. Well, that's not actually true. What they think is that it will always be there. They think that they can deny themselves willingly of freedom, and that they can just pick it up again, weeks or months, but probably not years even for them, but weeks or months later, and it will still be there, untarnished and pristine, like a favourite piece of jewellery that has been hidden and safe to be kept for best and brought out for that special occasion. But freedom is not a special occasion type of thing. It is an everyday necessity, just like plumbing, if somewhat more glorious. We need freedom, we just don't know how much. Even someone like me, who thinks about it incessantly, doesn't know how much. When we're starving, we won't need it, it's probably true to say. But up until that point, we need it. We need it to demonstrate to ourselves that we are responsible for our actions, that the things that we do may have an effect on our lives. If we don't have freedom, but instead are fed and clothed and kept comfortable and amused, what are we? Are we men? Are we human? Biologically, yes. At least so long as the vaccine doesn't lobotomise us, that is. But without freedom, we're just mammals, domesticated mammals, like cattle, bovine and docile. Or to put it another way, stupid and weak. And I know I've gone about it a lot, but freedom isn't just the freedom to drive from New York to California. That is the special occasion freedom, and we all need that from time to time. We call those holidays, or vacations if you're from North America. I don't imagine there's too many people arguing for more stringent lockdowns who, come July or August, won't be wanting to exercise their freedom to fly somewhere warm and sunny. How selfish of them. How very dare they. But it's everyday freedom that is the real McCoy. Everyday freedom is dropping in on an old friend out of the blue. Freedom is wandering around central London at 2 a.m. just to look at the sights. Freedom is your next door neighbour inviting you in for a cuppa after you've done them a favour. Freedom is helping an old lady back to her house after she's taken a tumble. Freedom is going to a busy pub where they're 4 deep at the bar and you're forced to stand in that space where someone's saying, "Excuse me," every 5 fucking seconds because they want to go for a slash. Freedom is standing in the cold for an hour to go and see your favourite band, or not even your favourite band. Freedom is joining a queue to watch some unknown because why not? And you find yourself in a smelly, sweating basement reliving your lost youth. Freedom is going from the caring restriction of childhood to the straining bonds of adolescence to finally breaking those bonds as you enter fully fledged adulthood. Freedom is when your world opens up even more as you get your driving licence. You drive too fast and you break down on the M6 at 4 in the morning with no breakdown cover. Freedom is crashing your dad's car. Freedom is getting drunk and stoned and missing the last train home because you were talking to that cute girl with the button nose. So you have to get the milk train back and it shocks you out of your blissed out state because those milk train drivers don't hang around at 5 in the morning. Freedom is sitting in a 10-mile tailback on the hottest day of the year with 40,000 others who also thought, well, the traffic won't be that bad. Freedom is climbing out of your bedroom window after you've been grounded because you just have to see her. Freedom is making new, unexpected friends. And freedom is that one-night stand that you still remember fondly after decades and you think wistfully, I wonder what happened to her. And freedom is also thinking the same about you. Freedom is smiling at strangers in the street, shaking hands and hugging friends. That is freedom. And I can't believe I've just had to go through all that just to try and make people realise how absolutely fucking valuable it is. How necessary it is for us to be human. To be free is to be human. And to be human is to be free. It is our natural state. And it is that freedom that is under threat. But to those who assume themselves above us, separate and different from us, that rich tapestry of life in a free country means nothing to them, for they have their own version of freedom, and it doesn't include us, and neither does it include all those messy and grubby examples I've just given. Their freedom involves money, power and luxury, avoidance of us and dominance over us, not with us. Because our freedoms just get in the way of theirs, it's us, the great unwashed, that cause traffic jams. And they despise that their Phantoms and Maybachs get caught in those very same traffic jams. If only they could get us out of the way, safely corralled into smart cities, then it's the open road for them. They've already managed to sidestep the common hordes clogging up the airports by having their own. Biggin Hill in Kent is one such no riff-raff hub for the private jet set. Their freedom is assured, gilt-edged by their wealth, their connections and their raw economic power. Their freedom is never in doubt. In this exaggerated crisis, they wouldn't have been troubled by frequent hand-washing, social distancing or masks, except for when the pantomime demands it, since they will never actually have mixed with the infected. Although ironically, they are the people that could deny themselves their everyday freedom, strictly for PR reasons of course, since its return is guaranteed. Unlike ours, our freedom is already being enthusiastically bargained away for those desperately timid souls crying out for the vaccine. Give us the vaccine, they plead. We'll do anything, as they obediently roll up their sleeves. Vaccination or health passports went from being a conspiracy theory to the government awarding the contract in a matter of weeks. As one wag on Twitter put it, I need some new conspiracy theories. All my old ones have come true. And this desperation is coming pretty close to what I judge, yes, judge, to be the very worst of all vices. Cowardice. You'd think, wouldn't you, that an alert and cautious man would have to be on the lookout for strong, tough men who might challenge him and those things he holds dear. It turns out it will be the cowards who are the most dangerous, for the coward who is willing to sell his own freedom for a little, and in this case it really is a little security, jeopardises the freedom of all others. The coward is the most dangerous of all men. So as we say good riddance to the car crash that is 2020 and hit the ground running with another national lockdown, which is little better than martial law by any other name, we need to brace ourselves for a continued struggle against apathy, against complacency, against COVID marshals and the numerous little Hitlers coming out of the woodwork for whom this day was tailor-made, against our own elected government, against Mengele Matt Hancock, against the lights of the perverted science of Vallance and Whitty, against Big Pharma and Big Tech, and a fascistic paramilitary COVID police force that will only ever follow orders, and against tyranny and the forces of darkness behind them. We need to brace ourselves against all of these demons, and in defending freedom, we need to be alert to that most dangerous and most corrosive of all things: cowardice.